My son-in-law looked me straight in the eye last Thursday afternoon and said, "This house would be perfect for my parents. They're moving in on Saturday." He said it the way someone reads off a grocery list. No question mark at the end. No hesitation. Just that flat, practiced calm he always had. The kind that made me feel, every single time, like I was the one who'd walked into the wrong room. I didn't say anything right away. I just stood there in my own kitchen, the coffee still dripping into the pot, the afternoon light coming through the window the way it always does, around 4 o'clock. Slanted and golden across the floor my late wife helped me refinish 31 years ago. We did it on our hands and knees together, the two of us, over a long weekend. She'd laughed so hard she cried when I got polystain on my elbow and didn't notice for 3 hours. I thought about that for a second. Just a second. Then I looked at my son-in-law, my daughter's husband of 4 years, a man I had never once been able to read, and I said, "I'm sorry, can you say that again?" He did, word for word. Same tone. His name is Aldrich. He goes by it formally always, even at Christmas dinner. He's one of those men who irons his jeans. Not a bad man, necessarily. I'd told myself that for 4 years. Just a man who saw the world as a series of arrangements to be optimized, including, apparently, me. My daughter's name is Winslow. I know. Her mother named her. Said it was her grandmother's maiden name, and I had learned very early in our marriage that there were certain arguments not worth having. Winslow turned out to be exactly right for her anyway. She grew into it. She's strong and a little formal on the outside, soft all the way through once you get past it. She was not in the room when Aldrich said what he said. She was upstairs, I found out later, sitting on the edge of the guest bed with her hands folded in her lap. I didn't know that then. I only knew she wasn't standing next to him, which told me something. I asked him what exactly he meant. He pulled out a chair at my kitchen table, the table I built myself in 1987 from a single slab of black walnut I'd found at an estate sale outside of Lexington. And he sat down like this was his house already. He laced his fingers together on the tabletop. "My parents are getting older," he said. "They need more space. Their apartment isn't working. This house has 4 bedrooms, a finished basement, and a yard. You live here alone. It's an inefficient use of a resource. I am 63 years old. I spent 38 years as a middle school science teacher. I coached baseball for 22 of those years. Boys who came in scrawny and uncertain and left with something steadier in their eyes. I buried my wife 6 years ago and I kept going. I am not a man who is easily rattled, but I will tell you honestly, I felt something go cold in my chest when he used the word resource. "You're talking about my home," I said. "I'm talking about square footage and practicality," he said. "You could move somewhere smaller, easier to maintain. You'd probably be happier." I noticed he didn't say we'd help me find something. He said I'd probably be happier, as if the whole thing was a gift he was giving me. I asked him if Winslow knew he was having this conversation. He said she was aware of the situation. That wasn't the same thing as yes. I'd been a teacher long enough to know exactly the difference between a child who understood something and a child who had been told something and nodded along. I set down my coffee cup very carefully. "I'd like to talk to her," I said. She came downstairs like she'd been waiting for the summons. I could see it in her face, that exhausted bracing, the look of someone who has spent days trying to figure out how to say a thing and still hasn't found the words. "Dad," she started. "Sit down, sweetheart," I said. She sat. Aldrich stayed at the table too, which was fine. I didn't have anything to say that I wouldn't say in front of him. I asked her, as calmly as I could manage, whether she actually wanted this. Whether this was something she had decided, or something that had been decided around her. She was quiet for a long moment. Long enough for the coffee maker to click off. Long enough for a car to pass on the street outside. Then she said, "Aldrich thinks it makes the most sense." "That's not what I asked you," I said. She looked down at the walnut table. She traced one of the grain lines with her finger, the way she used to do as a little girl when she was thinking hard. "I don't know, Dad," she said. "His parents do need somewhere, and you are here by yourself." There it was, by yourself, like it was a problem. Like the life I had built here, the 31 years of it, the garden I kept, and the workbench in the basement, and the neighbors I'd known since before Winslow was born. Like all of it was just a symptom of something that needed solving. I asked her one more thing. I asked her if she remembered what her mother had said, right before she died, about this house. Winslow pressed her lips together. she remembered. Her mother had made me promise. Not dramatically, not like something from a movie, just quietly. One night when we both knew time was getting short, she had held my hand and said, "Don't let anyone push you out of that house, Herschel. It's yours, it's ours." I had promised, and I keep my promises. I told Aldrich that his parents were welcome to visit any time. I told him I hoped they found something comfortable and suitable, and I would be happy to help look. Then I told him this conversation was over. He looked at me the way men like him look at obstacles. Like he was already calculating the workaround. "Think about it," he said. "We'll talk again next week." He says that. "We'll talk again next week." As if I'd asked for more time. As if it was already a negotiation. After they left, I sat alone at the walnut table for a long time. I want to be careful here not to paint myself as some kind of wronged saint. I'm not. I'm a stubborn man, I know it, and I have made real mistakes with Winslow over the years. Been too proud when I should have bent, held on to things longer than I should have. When her mother died, I retreated in ways that weren't fair to anyone. I know that, but I also know what my life is. I know what this house is, and I know what it means when someone sits at your table and calls your home a resource. I didn't sleep well that night. I kept thinking about my wife. I kept thinking about Winslow's face when she traced the grain of the table. I kept thinking about every parent I'd ever known who'd said yes to something like this, because they didn't want to cause trouble, and then lived out their last years somewhere small and beige and not quite theirs, visiting themselves. By morning I had made a decision. Not a dramatic one. Not a confrontation. Just a quiet thing I needed to do. I called Tobias. Tobias Fenn is 71 years old and one of the sharpest men I have ever known. He was my first real student, not chronologically, but the first one who made me understand what teaching actually was. He came into my 7th grade class in the fall of 1989, a skinny kid with a broken front tooth and shoes that were too big for him, and he could barely read. Not because he wasn't smart. He was the smartest child in the room, but he'd moved 8 times in 5 years. And somewhere along the way, the basics had just slipped through. We spent a year and a half working through it. Saturday mornings at the kitchen table. This kitchen table, this same one, working through reading and then math and then science. Because once you gave Tobias the vocabulary, there was nothing he couldn't do with it. He graduated high school, then college, then law school. He's been a property attorney in Cincinnati for 34 years. He answered on the second ring. "Herschel," he said before I'd even said hello. 40 years and he still has that voice, low and careful, the voice of a man who measures his words. I told him what had happened, all of it. He didn't interrupt. When I was done, there was a brief silence, and then he said, "Okay, I want to look at the deed and I want to look at your will as it currently stands, and then we're going to have a longer conversation. Can you scan and send me those this afternoon?" I said I could. "Good," he said. "And Herschel? Don't respond to anything Aldrich says in writing until we've talked. Not email, not text, nothing." I said I understood. "This is going to be fine," he said. It wasn't false comfort, it was just information. The next few days were the strange part. Aldrich texted me twice, both messages pleasant, almost breezy, like we'd agreed on something and were just scheduling it. Just wanted to follow up when you have a moment. Then, "My parents are excited about the possibility. I think you'll really enjoy having neighbors who feel like family." I did not respond. Winslow called once. We talked for 20 minutes about nothing relevant, how her garden was doing, what I'd been reading, and I let her, because I knew she needed time to come to things on her own. She always had. Pushing her never worked. Her mother had understood that better than I did, and I had learned it late, but I had learned it. What I did during those days was this. I went through 38 years of my career, and I made a list. Not dramatically, not with any particular agenda, just a list of names. Kids I'd actually reached, really reached, in the way you sometimes do in this job if you're lucky and paying attention. Kids who had come through my classroom not just with more science knowledge, but with something they hadn't had before. Kids I'd driven to hospitals, to job interviews, to college orientations. Kids whose parents had called me years later to say their child had become something. Kids who had called me themselves. I had not done this to collect a debt. I want to be very clear about that. None of it was transactional, and none of it is now. I did it because it was the job, and because I loved the job, and because most of these kids needed someone who would stay and I could stay. But I made the list, And then, very quietly, I sent some messages. Not asking for anything exactly, just reaching out, checking in. And, when it seemed appropriate, mentioning that I was dealing with a situation at home and that I wanted people who knew me to have my phone number handy. The following Saturday, Aldrich's parents arrived. Not to move in. He hadn't gotten that far, but he had brought them by to see the house, which I had not been informed of in advance. I found out when a car I didn't recognize pulled into my driveway at 10 in the morning. I watched from the window for a moment. Aldrich got out first, then helped his mother from the back seat. His father came around from the passenger side. They were pleasant-looking people. I want to say that clearly. Older than me by a few years, well-dressed, nothing in their manner that suggested they knew anything was wrong with this visit. That part wasn't their fault. I went outside. Aldrich smiled when he saw me. That particular smile. I thought it would be nice if they could see the place, he said. Since we're all moving toward this. We're not moving toward anything, I said. Pleasantly. I said it pleasantly. His father looked at Aldrich. Some communication passed between them that I didn't try to read. I invited them in for coffee, because whatever was happening between me and Aldrich, these two people hadn't done anything wrong. We sat in the living room. His mother admired the fireplace. His father asked me how long I'd lived here. I told him. He seemed genuinely interested. He asked about the neighborhood, and I told him about the Callahans next door, who had chickens now, which I had initially objected to and now sort of loved, and about the old Ferris family who'd sold their place 3 years ago, but whose son still came back to mow the lawn of the empty lot, because he wasn't ready to let it go all the way. His parents were kind people. That made it harder, in a way. After an hour, they left. Aldrich at the door said, in a low voice, I think they loved it. I said, that doesn't change anything. His jaw tightened just slightly. Herschel, I'm trying to be reasonable here. I know you think you are, I said. Tobias called me 3 days later. Everything's clean, he said. Sole ownership, no ambiguity, no leverage. He can't compel anything. What he's doing is just pressure. I said I knew. But here's what I want you to think about, Tobias said. Pressure works when there's nothing pushing back. You need something visible. I told him about the messages I'd been sending. There was a pause. How many people? He said. I told him I'd reached out to maybe 40, that maybe 30 had responded. Another pause, longer this time. Herschel, he said. Do you know what you've got there? I said I was starting to get an idea. I did not plan what happened the next Saturday as any kind of dramatic gesture. That's important to me. I'm too old for dramatic gestures and I find them embarrassing in myself. What I planned was simple. I told people I was having a cookout. Nothing more than that. Just, come if you can, bring whoever you want. I'm making ribs and there's plenty. The first car arrived at noon. It was Jonquil Reeves. She goes by Jo, who'd been in my class in 1997 and was now a pediatric nurse over in Dayton. She brought her husband and their youngest. The second car was Ambrose Park, who I had driven to a college interview when he was 17 because his family didn't have a car and it was raining and the bus wasn't going to get him there on time. He runs an engineering firm now. He brought flowers, which I wasn't expecting. By 1 o'clock, there were 11 cars in the driveway and along the street. By 2 o'clock, there were 27. By 3, I'd lost count. Tobias had come down from Cincinnati. The Callahans had come over from next door with something they'd baked. Former students had brought their children, some of them old enough to be in middle school themselves. My backyard, the one my wife had planted, the one I had kept up stubbornly through every hard year, was full of people. The smell of the grill, kids I didn't know chasing each other across the grass, Jonquil organizing people to bring out more chairs, Ambrose at the grill taking over from me with a confidence that made me laugh. Aldrich came. He didn't know about the cookout. He pulled up around 3:30, and I watched from the back porch as he came through the side gate and stopped. Just stopped. Took in the yard. 40, 50 people. Laughter and music from somebody's phone, somebody's kid laughing too loud near the garden beds. He found me on the porch. He said very quietly, "What is this?" I said, "People I know. People who know me. People who know this house." He looked at the yard for a long moment. Then he looked at me. "I want you to understand something," I said. "I am not alone. I have never been alone. And this house is not a resource." Winslow appeared at his shoulder. I hadn't seen her come in. Her eyes were wet, which she was trying to control and mostly couldn't. She was looking at the yard the way you look at something, when you suddenly see it for what it is. All of it, all at once. Aldrich said something about them talking later. I said that was fine. He left through the side gate without saying goodbye to anyone, and honestly, I think that was the right call, the most decent one he'd made all month. Winslow stayed. She stood there on the porch next to me watching her own life, the life she'd been raised inside without always knowing the shape of it. Jo came over and introduced herself, and turned out they had met, once, at something years ago. Then Ambrose, who told Winslow a story about her father I had completely forgotten, something about a flooded basement, and 3 ruined textbooks and me showing up with a stack of my own books and a mop, and she laughed, really laughed, and then put her hand over her mouth. After a while she leaned against my shoulder, the way she had when she was small. I didn't know, she said. I knew who you were, but I didn't know it looked like this. Your mother did, I said. She used to say I collected people. She was right. We stood there for a while without talking. Tobias caught my eye from across the yard and raised his lemonade at me, and I raised mine back. I don't know exactly what Winslow said to Aldrich after that day. I've chosen not to ask, and she's chosen not to tell me, which is probably the right way to handle it. What I know is that his parents found a place, a really nice condominium, from what Winslow mentioned, in a complex with a pool and their own kind of community, which honestly sounds better for them anyway than a stranger's house in a neighborhood they don't know. Aldrich has been quieter around me since. Not unfriendly exactly, just recalibrated. I'll take it. Winslow has called more. Real calls, not the checking-in kind, but the talking kind. The kind where an hour goes by without either of us noticing. She came over last Sunday and we made her mother's recipe for tomato soup from scratch and ate it at the walnut table. And she asked me to tell her more about the early years, the classroom years, the years before she was old enough to remember. I talked for 3 hours. She listened to all of it. There's a thing you learn if you spend a long time working with children, working with young people who have nothing and need something and are terrified to ask. The most important investment you can ever make is in another person's dignity. It doesn't pay off in a way you can put in a spreadsheet. It doesn't come back to you on a schedule, but it comes back. It always comes back. I still sit at that kitchen table every morning with my coffee. The light still comes through the window at 4 o'clock the way it always has. The floors my wife and I refinished together still have the faint shadow of a stain near the back door, from a bottle of olive oil I dropped in 2004, and she never let me fully forget. I wouldn't change 1 inch of it,